at the last day of camp. Whoa! Can you believe it? All week we've been learning about who? That's right, Abraham. All week we've been learning about Abraham. And today we're going to learn about the last story as we followed Abraham's life. And today we're talking about what happened after Abraham. We learned about God's promises earlier in the week to Abraham. We learned how God keeps his promises even when things are scary, that we need to trust him. And today we're going to talk about how God fulfills his promises. And today's big idea is God's plan is greater than mine. Now here, I want you to think of a time when you were growing up and you were reminded of a rule. Maybe it was at your house, maybe it was at school, maybe it was at a time even at, Wumba. We have our Wumba rules, right? Remember even a Wumba rule. And you think of an instance when maybe you didn't want to listen to that rule. You didn't really like the rule. You didn't really want to follow it at all. Or for example, you didn't really want to wait for something when you were told to wait. You see, sometimes we have a hard time following these rules. And a lot of the times, it's really frustrating, some of these rules. But often these rules are put into place for our safety, and it's put into place to keep us safe and to keep us from making the same mistakes that other people have made. And that's very similar to how God views his plan versus ours. I know in my life, I have asked God for something and I wanted it to happen like right away. I said, God, I would really like to go to this school and get into this school. And then boom, I want it to happen right away. But God says, no, Derek. Or is it Clumpy? You have to wait. And that's how God's plans sometimes work. They take time. But we need to remember that God's plan is greater than mine. And today, we want to look back to the huge promise that was made earlier in the week. Do you remember what that promise was? Here's a little hint. It has something to do with our theme this week. That's right. In wonder, right? God promised Abraham that his descendants would be as many as the stars in the sky. Now think of looking up at night. Or you can look up where you're watching this Bible blueprint right now and see all those stars. There's just a few there. Then think of the sky, the actual sky, and all these stars. And God told them that he would have as many descendants, that's children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren, and as many as the stars in the sky. And then Abraham and Sarah finally have their son Isaac, where that can start. And then in Genesis 24, we get to see Abraham determined to find his son Isaac a wife, because he wants to see the descendants. Isaac, in order to have the kids, is going to have to get married. So Abraham wants him to have a wife. And Isaac marries this girl named Rebecca. Is there anyone here named Rebecca? Well, Isaac marries a girl named Rebecca. But Abraham was so old that he actually passes away. And in Genesis 25, it says this, in verse 7, Abraham lived for 175 years. Whoa, that is a long time. I don't know if I can live that long. That's a long time. And he died at a really old age, having lived a very long and satisfying life. And as he breathed his last, he joined his ancestors in the grave. And his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave at Machpelah near Mamre. Those are hard words. In the field of Ephron, the son of Zorah the Hittite. Whoa, those are a lot of hard words. Basically, they buried Abraham in a cave. This was the field that Abraham had purchased earlier from the Hittites, and where Sarah was buried as well. And after Abraham died, God blessed his son Isaac, who settled near Beer Lahai Roi in the Negev. So Abraham, he lives for a very long time. He was a really old man when he died. And he never really fully got to experience God's promise and purpose for his family. However, Abraham trusted that God's plan was greater than his own wishes and desires. God's plans was greater than his. And I'm sure Abraham wished that he could have grown older and seen all these descendants, but he passed away, and even in that, he trusts God. And he believed that God would fulfill his legacy even after he died. And you see, Abraham's life, these 175 years, even though that seems like a long time, is actually a short time in the span of Abraham's family, because they lived for thousands of years and actually are still living today. The people of Abraham's descendants are still living here today. And many of them live in Israel and all over the world. This was just the beginning. And 4,000 years later, Jesus was born. And Jesus, who we learned about earlier, is a descendant of Abraham. Jesus is a part of this legacy. See, in Hebrews 11, verse 8 to 16, it says this: all the people died still believing what God had promised them. They did not receive what they promised, but they saw it from a distance and they welcomed it. They agreed that they were foreigners here on earth. Obviously, people who say such things are looking forward to a country they can call their own. If they had longed for a country they came from, they could have gone back. But they were looking for a better place, a heavenly homeland. That is why God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. My friends, if we've learned anything here this week, I want you to know that you are so special to God that he planned thousands of years in advance so you could be in relationship with him. That thousands of years ago, he promised Abraham that these descendants would come. And then a couple thousand years later, Jesus, God's one and only Son, is born into the world. And we can have a relationship with Jesus, who died for us on a cross, and he loves us very, very much. And no matter where we've come from, no matter how broken the world looks like, we can trust in Jesus. And I want you, if you get a chance, to ask your toolkit leader what that looks like. What did Jesus do? Who is Jesus? And what does it mean to follow him? I have loved hanging out with you all this week. Thank you so much for coming to Wampa. The day's not over yet. We have lots of fun yet today. And have a great rest of your day.